Pick a chair, any chair.
So many choices. Is this one of the ones I can take, or?
I don't know. Yeah, I know you can't take any of those.
Oh, wait a second, what we have, 20?
You're fine.
No, is that how many we're doing?
6. This is as many seats that are apparently gonna put here.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's, is that what we're down to, is 20? In a
No, I
room?
don't even think so. Melena did it. It's not
I
my
did
fault.
do it, and I felt weird about it.
You should feel weird. It's all your fault. Don't sit there.
Hey Beth, you got a clicker?
Did what?
Clicker.
No why?
We
Okay.
go to a head count as they come to the door. Yeah, it's probably Ethan's traffic counter. Probably Ethan's traffic counter.
Plenty of room for activities, that's for sure.
It's really weird in here.
It's very weird. in here. You're right in the front too.
Guess so.
So neat.
Oh, I like this.
We got the front lines.
I guess I never sit in the front of the class, man. Never.
Look, I'm at the head of
It's
the
so
table.
empty here, it's very fun. We're certainly calisthenics.
No, I know.
Look, you're sitting right from the side.
It's a little weird.
I sit like this. I'm not gonna- Hey, Counselor Moore. How you doing?
You get the pages of mine in there somewhere. Still coming off of that. I've only got mine so far. Oh, here's one of yours. Yeah. Is that it? Can't see. Maybe it's not the printer stuff. Must be still coming off the. Yeah. So, as you know, we're going, this is kind of weird watching the type. Yeah. As you know, we're going to be putting in an executive order and just working on the final drafts that we talked about in the press conference. And that won't go into effect until 8 a.m. on Monday. But based on the parameters of the executive order and the best advice from the CDC with regard to minimum 2-meter separation, this is the layout in the room. So we want to give you a sense and feel of how this will need to work in the future, even though that won't go into effect until 8 a.m. on Monday morning. I could say standing room only, but no, standing room actually wouldn't be permitted because it would exceed the guidelines of the CBC, and we're determined to adhere to that. But in any regard, this is not going to at all inhibit public process. All our meetings are still broadcast. They're going to be broadcast as always. The public is encouraged to participate. Any comments they make that can come in real time will be provided to all the counselors with a printer that Beth will have. And so all the public process is going to continue, but public safety is paramount. So who's the applicant? Must be Councilor Gibbs or Councilor Moore.
Call the City Infrastructure Committee meeting to order. Have a roll call
This is strange.
Counselor Moore?
here.
Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Mayor Reed?
Here.
Counselor Barbell?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor DeDominicis?
Here.
Counselor McFarland?
Thank you. Now, the reports of department representatives to the councilors.
Should be in front of you, an outline of what DPW is gonna be working on for this 2020 season. Currently, we're sort of in a transitional phase. Obviously, we're still, plows are ready, but why we don't have snow we're doing some, routine maintenance, hydrants, sewer cleaning, doing extensive cleaning on Cornelia Street. We had some issues there, on Restaurant Row. That's occurring at night, so most of you probably don't see that due to traffic, and routine maintenance work. But the sheet was placed before you, we compiled a list of, road reconstruction projects. We have a water line replacement, special projects, which we've talked about at length, and then also at the bottom of the first page, other projects that we might be involved in DPW in some capacity. A lot of these are community development items, but we do support some of those. The second page, our routine projects and programs that go on throughout the summer. It gives you an idea of what we have happening. I think one of the reasons is we want to show it all, or at least try to put as much of it on paper as possible, is based on, obviously, what we have is a diminished number of people in this room. If we have a diminished number of people in our department based on health, this list will go down. And then we'll have to have a discussion at that time about what's essential. But in the meantime, this is what we are gonna try to accomplish. The road reconstruction projects, it looks like we have a lot there. A lot of these are small streets. They'll be happen relatively quickly. I'm gonna try to make them happen early in the season as opposed to wait to the end of the season. So if I coordinate this correctly, try to get it done in the first, probably after the plant opens, maybe the first 2-3 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. Any questions?
Well, when is the anticipated start date for Cone Avenue?
Well, they're gonna have drawings out to bid, what, May?
Yeah, so the anticipation for both PSAP and Cogan Avenue is that we should be putting out to bid the middle of May.
Yeah.
So, we should have everything back by early June.
Yeah. So it'll be a middle to, run through the end of the, end of the construction season.
Okay, so summer.
Yeah, summer and into fall.
Well, I really like the idea that we have, we have a plan in place, it's very good. I don't remember in the past when we had a firm plan and for all these things, and it shows you guys are planning ahead, trying to.
We've always had these plans, Counselor. It's nothing new. I think it's just, we put it on paper for you guys. Again, we want you to understand what we have. We have a lot on our plate. Some of these programs, if you go to the second page, you'll see things, crack sealing, painted pavement markings, street sign survey. Some of these things are always ongoing. We're always doing them, but people aren't aware that we're doing them. One of the big ones is utility mapping. Andrew's very versatile and everyone is very fond of his skills, but his primary his primary job for us is utility mapping. He gets pulled away from that a lot. He's it's very critical to our organization to know where things are and be very exact with it. You can make a big mess of things in a hurry if the mapping is not right, and that's why Andrew's here. Along with, you see the New York State dig tickets. The other thing item number 13 on the second page is something that we haven't done in a long period of time. I've been here, it'll be 5 years this year. Mr. Brody and myself have talked about this at length, is a comprehensive flow test program for the city fire hydrants. Why we flush hydrants yearly. The fire department does that. We haven't done a comprehensive flow of the whole city probably since 87, 89. We do spot check them, but we are geared to do that, and we're gonna go from one end of the city to the other and do that. And that's a big program. And I think the mayor brought that up at a previous council meeting some while ago, so we're gonna take care of that.
One other item actually not on the list is about the million other things that you all do to, moving a ladder for us, or doing something at City Hall, or putting in some signs and stuff. There's a few projects that aren't on this list that will still get done, and we're looking for different means to do it. We need to repair the Anderson building, so we could go out and contract that out for about $29,000 is our estimate. We constantly do work on the courthouse building, and you're constantly running down there to fix things or paint this wall, et cetera. And we contract out a lot for that as well at pretty high rates. What we're contemplating, and it's within their budget, or the city's budget, is instead hiring a building supervisor to do a lot of this stuff in-house. And hopefully that will alleviate some of those loads off you all, so you can focus on this list, and a building supervisor and the occasional crew member that might work with them can take care of the smaller stuff that really is a distraction from your central goal of doing this. We believe that program can then pay for itself because we don't have to contract out. We collect the overhead on that from the court system, et cetera. We save the 29 grand by fixing the Anderson building ourselves. And that's in the works now too. If any of you know a very talented building and trade supervisor, certainly let us know, because we've been given approval by civil service to design that. And that's kind of partially at the behest of poor Sylvia, who, as the clerk, has the job of running this building and running the courthouse. And really, that's very high expertise requirements to coordinate all those contractors and stuff. And it's really great you guys have filled in and helped her out on that. But we've kind of been over our head in trying to figure out a more efficient way to spend taxpayer money in that. That's not part of the program right yet, but you may hear more about that in the future. And thank you all for helping us design that.
I have a question on Beekman Street. And this is a complete reconstruction of the road, is it? Because wasn't it just a few years ago you did resurfacing on Beekman?
Beekman was actually a complete reconstruction from Cornelia back to Broad Street. This is gonna be a complete reconstruction from
Cornelia to Boynton.
From Cornelia to Boynton.
Okay. One other question then. The potholes. I was driving around and not seeing a lot of potholes. And I was questioning whether is this the process that you put in place last year, that at least the first time I had seen it, where you're grinding down the area around the pothole, filling it, and then repaving over it. Do you believe that that's contributing to fewer, they're not breaking up?
What contributed is we paved, I think, we had 13 separate paving projects last year, so comprehensive, basically, a pothole repair is a pothole repair. We milled and resurfaced 13 separate streets last year. Portions of, complete in portions. I mean, if you take Cornelia Street, for instance, we went from the town line all the way right down to Beekman Street.
Well, I was
That's a lot. That's what, I think what you're seeing is resurfacing so many roads, and Mike can attest to it down in your end of town. We hit a couple late in the season. The potholes are probably a lot better down there. The bottom of Battery Hill, we had to dig it back up because we had an issue, but that's gonna be resurfaced under the.
Even that's better.
It's better.
Well, I was just my curiosity really was, is this process that you're using a new approach to filling potholes, or is this what you've been doing all along?
We've been doing it all along. We have,
And so probably it's as much the winter that we've had isn't as severe as the previous winter, that,
We're a little more aggressive with pothole filling.
yeah.
That's what we're doing.
But
Okay.
the milder winter has helped though too. Last year was tough.
But I missed something, but you also now are cutting out the square patches, and you have that special machine that we didn't used to deploy.
Yeah, I mean, we have a new milling head. We actually have two machines that can mill. And it's a higher capacity, so we're able to move quicker. And we have so that's one of the things we're doing a little bit different. It's the same tool, just a little more high performance, basically.
It's not that, there's a little hole here, stuff a little bit of asphalt in there and bang it down. They're actually milling a section out and then replacing it as if it's a section. I think that is far more successful, isn't it?
Yeah, we're putting out a lot more, a better repair.
thanks.
Yep.
I have a question for you, Mike, while we're talking about streets. I had a constituent ask about South Peru Street. I guess we've had a number of water main breaks
Yes, we have.
along South Peru, and she wondered when that street is up for, if not a complete rebuild, then at least repair to the water main and the surface of the road above it.
Well, the repairs that currently have, we had a couple breaks this winter, and obviously anytime you do a repair, and you try to patch in the wintertime without hot mix, we're not gonna have a smooth road surface. So the very first thing we'll do, once the asphalt plant opens, is we will patch those areas appropriately and make it ride better. As far as the water line goes, we have done an assessment. Andrew put together a map, Mike gave it to the mayor with the leak history that we had in that area. It is high, the pipe is newer comparatively speaking, what is it, seventies?
60s, I believe.
60s, so that's pretty new for us. Why it's not performing well in that area, we're not quite sure. It looks like mostly the backfill material and some differential settling. But right now, it's not currently on the list to be replaced, but we're gonna look at it this summer and try to make a determination. Is the water line gonna be replaced this construction season? No. But the road will be patched better and made to ride better.
Okay, thank you.
Are you gonna be able to do some striping this year?
Yes, the last 2 years, we've done the whole budget. We spent every dollar in our budget for painted pavement markings, both epoxy and the latex. It seems like we scrape it right off the road with the plows, though. So.
Yeah, we need to restripe Court Street now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mike, what are the 5 intersections of the PSAP grant?
It is the Cornelia and Broad Street intersection, right there by the old Lord Cantwell's office. Then you have Cornelia and Prospect, Cornelia and Beekman, Cornelia, North Catherine, and Oak and Brinkerhoff right by the library.
And what is the PSAP? I thought one of them was gonna be the 6-way intersection on Weed, Margaret, Miller.
So that was one that had been submitted to DOT for the initial grant for consideration, but the cost to do that would have far exceeded the money that they had awarded us. So initially, they had awarded us, I think, $570,000. So they had approved 2 projects, 2 intersections. So when we hired CNS as the design engineer, they looked at it and said, well, we have enough money to do a couple smaller intersections. So we went ahead and added 3 more intersections to that with the approval of DOT.
This is the one that's building like curb cuts and crosswalks?
Crosswalks, push buttons, they're associated with the lights. So they're all intersections that already have lights. So it'll upgrade the,
They'll be controlled.
control boxes and.
Okay. But nothing's gonna be done on that one big intersection? Cause I know on that intersection, we don't even have crosswalks where you can cross from the, western end of Riley to the eastern end of Riley.
Yes, yeah, I believe that one, I have to look back, that project alone would have been around 400,000.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because it's a major intersection.
All set?
Thank you, Mike. Well, this time I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda items 1 through 9. Recommended to the council. You have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Number 7.
1 through 9.
She said with number 7, did you want to discuss your resolution now, or do you want to wait till the work session or the regular meeting?
I'd like to go ahead and move it, but to discuss it in detail, during the regular meeting.
Moore, and then who seconded it?
Yep.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Is there any old business? New business, is this appropriate time to bring up to a local law? Want to schedule a hearing for that, or we should do that?
Can we do it during the common council meeting as well?
Is there any new business? If not, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. Staring right at you, Jeff.
Counselor Moore?
Like, what are you waiting
Yes.
for?
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Okay, committee meeting is adjourned.
It was a very efficient meeting, given the amount of stuff that your committee's doing right now. You know, with the better weather coming out there, a lot of projects we're gonna start seeing sprouting very, very quickly, not only through the DPW and the water and sewer people, but also DRI too. So it's very exciting, and I'm sure we're gonna be very, very busy. And thank you all. I know you're gonna be working very, very hard very soon. So we begin the work session tonight. I think we've got an awful lot on the agenda tonight, and I do know that some of the discussion Councillor Kelly would like to reserve for the actual council meeting, but whatever as you wish. Anything on the agenda you'd like to have a further discussion on?
I would. I see item G on the regular agenda, which is number 8 on our infrastructure agenda, about the request to sign a home rule request in support of Senate bill in support of a special state law to allow the County of Clinton, and in addition, City of Plattsburgh to have a land bank. Can we talk about that?
Sure. As you know, we've applied for a land bank more than a year ago, early 2019, maybe late 2018, as soon as.
It was about this time last year we started getting involved in the process.
Yeah.
And we put together the documentation and everything, so.
We submitted it. It was favorably received by ESD. Their comment was, however, that only one land bank will be granted to each county because that's the way the statute was written. When Senator Little, about that same time, heard that, she recognized that the circumstances for the need for a land bank for the county are absolutely legitimate. We really hope and encourage them to go through their land bank, and we would much like to further their interest best we can. Their original land bank, when we were working out our needs for a land bank, was primarily designed around demolition of properties. They had a couple of properties in Dannemora, they've been quite notorious for a number of years. I can think of one in Moores. These are usually dilapidated properties that either couldn't sell or at auction, foreclosure auction, have been abandoned for years and are a health and safety hazard, or they're burned out wrecks of buildings that have also been abandoned. And up till then, each municipality would, through the county, as the county, being the tax collector, would condemn these and demolish them using county funds. So their land bank was designed initially with demolition in mind, not reconstruction. So we said at the same time, well, our problem isn't so much demolition, although we have identified 2 or 3 properties in the city that probably needed to be demolished, and I think you all know where they are. We've discussed them at length in the past. But also there's a number of properties which we call stage 3 or stage 4 that could be rehabilitated. And so these properties, we're interested less in demolition and far more in rehabilitation. So we produced a land bank application to the state focusing on rehabilitation rather than simply demolition. The state responded saying, great application, but let's see what Clinton County's got the first shot at it. So we submitted that to also the senator and the assembly person, and that time they said, let's see what we can do, and they've been working on it ever since. Since then, the county has been more amenable to modify their land bank to potentially include us, and we certainly would like to be included to any extent possible that allow us to do our thing and to take care of our pressing needs with the freedom and retain our funds as need be, and they may be able to accommodate that for us. But this legislation would allow us to also have our own land bank and identify it solely based on our needs, and at the same time essentially allow them to have their land bank as well, which we could also still be a member of. So this is, everybody's got their cake and eating it too. It's a win-win. They get to do their thing, we can join with them, we also get to do our thing without any consequences. At one time, before this sponsorship of this legislation by our 2 representatives, it was going to be one or the other. Now it's going to be one and the other. So I think this is a very positive development for not only the city, but also for the county. now they don't have to feel their application is somehow in competition with ours, or vice versa, and that was never our intention to not want them to be able to pursue their needs as we pursue ours.
So what happens next?
Well, and I don't know really the dynamics of how the Assembly and the Senate work, but if this passes, then presumably both of us would be favorably disposed to get our land banks. If it doesn't pass, then obviously we'd be wanting to have continued discussions with the county on theirs.
Do you know when this is up for vote?
Almost immediately, that's why they rushed us through to ask us for approval. The session ends, I think, in about 2 months' time, the end of May, and so they have to get this through the various committees before they can get it on the floor. But they believe that they possibly can do it, but I wouldn't want to put odds on it one way or the other.
Okay, is there anything I need to sign, because I'm clerk of the common council?
Yeah, there'll be a certification
Okay.
form that you need to sign 8 times over. We need originals, I guess, 4 to the Assembly, 4 to the Senate. So if approved, then, yeah, you would be signing it's a basic certification saying that the council adopted a resolution authorizing the mayor to submit this application.
Okay.
And the rest would then be up to our assembly person and our senator.
Someone like to sign bills?
Do I have to touch them?
Yeah, you may be able to.
Guess I got it.
You got a lot of paper there.
I do.
Give it to Paul and
You can give it to Paul. It's totally fine.
think. Got the, okay. Thank you.
Of course, we can do our regular reports, but would you like a little bit of discussion on the COVID-19 actions on behalf of our city? I could wait to do it during common council meeting, or we could discuss it now, as you wish.
Seems to be pretty obvious, at least a little bit.
Yeah, has anybody noticed any changes in the room when the CDC guidelines right now is in an effort to slow down the transmission of COVID-19 to maintain 2 meter spacing. So we worked out and measured this room out. Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Kelly actually helped me this afternoon, along with our planner and Ethan, to measure out this room. It works out that our occupancy based on CDC recommendations is 20 people, and hence the spacing of about 6.5, 7 feet per chair in the room right now. The city is taking leadership along with the mayor of Saranac Lake to be well ahead in this discussion. Some people may argue currently that we're being overly cautious. If we didn't do this, some people may be arguing a month from now that we didn't do enough early enough. So we're erring on the side of caution. 2 weeks ago, if you're following the CDC guidelines, they would have said this is primarily an issue for those people who've traveled to various high-risk countries, South Korea, China, Italy, etc. Now they're arguing that in the United States, the primary transmission mechanism is not from travel, but from communication by people who are already here. I believe, and first of all, I don't think there's any reason to panic, but I believe it's highly likely that there's some individual in Plattsburgh right now that's coronavirus positive. I think the odds just suggested that almost has to be true. We have, speaking with the president of the university yesterday, he estimates that around 8% of his students go home for the weekends, and many of them live in the New York City area. So, and healthy young people often return infected but are asymptomatic. They're healthy, they don't have any of the, or any very strong prevalent symptoms, but nonetheless they can be carriers. So we'd like to, in the city, set an example and ensure that all the customers that flow in and out of our offices, primarily city clerk's office, building inspector's office, finance office downstairs, if they potentially could be bringing a risk of an infection in, we don't want them to leave that infection with one of our employees and then have one of our employees in turn infect another customer who may be then going and visiting their grandmother that night, a vulnerable population, and infecting them. We also are encouraging our employees to, if they have any concern about their health, to not come to work sick, because sick leave is designed just as much to protect them and their family as it is to protect all their coworkers from also getting sick. So we developed today about 10 different policies with the help of various department heads and CDC advice from NICOM and other mayors. And they're doing the same thing in Saranac Lake as well. And we're also issuing an executive order, an emergency order, effective at 8 a.m. on Monday to develop change our operations to be consistent with all the best advice. So Saranac Lake and Plattsburgh are probably a little bit in front of the curve for municipalities in this. Certainly schools, and Councilor Gibbs is relating some of the discussions they've been having in their school. Certainly you saw the headlines from SUNY, and I spent an hour speaking with the president on their actions yesterday. Certainly the health department and the hospital are well ahead of this discussion. Municipalities tend to be lagging behind a little bit, but a number of us felt that we didn't want to squander this opportunity or risk our population. We know that we're the only city for 100 miles. That means we have a greater concentration of elderly that need more advanced and extended care than the rest of the population. So because that high population of elderly in our nursing homes, group homes, extended care facilities, hospitals, etc., and because of their vulnerability, we felt that we had to do something a little bit more pronounced than, say, an adjoining town might need to do. So that's what brought us to this point. I'm very pleased with the level of cooperation and innovation that I received from my department heads. For instance, Department Head Ruff, their group is videoing some of their critical operations. So they have video documentation of how to do this thing. If one of their critical operators is out for an extended time, somebody else can have a video for how to operate a certain set of valves, etc. In this building, finance and Sylvia have been very proactive in developing protocols for cleaning, and instead of concentrating a bunch of customers in a room to wait to pay their bill, to distribute them up and down the hallway in 7-foot, 2-meter intervals so they can separate, but also to move as much as possible onto online. We're working to develop our forms in PDF fillable form. MLD's been very cooperative in allowing us a different protocol. So if you want to open up an account, you won't necessarily have to come in to open up an account. Always you've had to come in. We've got automatic bill pay that, as you know, we put in place a few months ago, and automatic account deduction, reduction in the rate that people have to pay using their credit cards, etc. So we're trying to move the city to more online procedures. This layout, we measured off the room, and we can fit 20 people in this room and still be within standards. That doesn't mean we want to at all affect the number of people that can attend. They can certainly attend electronically. They're going to be able to comment electronically in real time, and there'll be limited room in this for guests, invited guests, and staffers, et cetera, to conduct our meetings. So we believe we can do all of our operations just as before, but with some accommodation. We just have to do it smartly and leverage technology more. So that's the goal of doing this. And we hope we can set an example. Obviously, we can't mandate how anything is done in the private sector, or at least we're not prepared to at this point. If there was really an emergency necessary, we'd look for greater powers to do that. But we would like to use these powers we do have to affect how things are done in public buildings for the foreseeable future. Any questions or concerns about this?
I'd just like to say, I'm pleased that we're doing what we can to prevent the spread of the disease, because once it's out there, you can't get it back. The best solution is to avoid any unnecessary contact between people.
And John Russ got an analogy, the solution to pollution is dilution, is what he always says. Same sort of thing here, you spread people out. What has the effect of is it delays the peak of this infection. You know, it is gonna peak at some point. It delays it a little bit, slows it down, but it also lowers the peak substantially. And that's what we're trying to affect. If we can lower that peak from here down to here and save or lose half as many lives of our vulnerable population, that could be a number of lives saved right here in Plattsburgh, and that certainly is worth some of the inconvenience. You've all, I don't think there's been an issue in recent memory where the public has become as engaged and informed as this one. People are really following this. And you know that the death rate from this infection is higher than regular influenza. A lot of people die of regular influenza each year. The president, to his credit, was correct in making that statement. It's correct. But the difference in this is that, first of all, it's got about twice the death rate of the flu if you catch the infection. But what we're really worrying about is it's got twice the infection rate. It's far more virile than a typical flu because we don't have the defenses from this new virus. For the flu, on average, one person infected will infect one more person. Here, on average, one person infected will infect two more people. So think of that in exponential chart you remember from high school math. And you increase that exponential growth rate by 2, and that graph is increasing much, much more quickly. So that we're really concerned about is the social separation to try to drive down the infection rate. And we think it's worth the investment in that. But I'm very pleased with the level of interest in the public on this. No reason to panic. As we go through the right steps, take the precautions necessary, not just through us, but through the school districts, the hospitals, the sporting events. You saw the NBA was suspended. The NHL, I think, was just suspended. I think Councilor Barbell mentioned a few moments ago. It's not quite business as usual. We can still get an awful lot done by simply adjusting and accommodating a little bit, and that's what the city's trying to do. So I'm very grateful that the public is so interested in getting informed in this. And as always, we ask the public to not panic. Everything is fine. Everybody, in my observation, is taking all the right steps. And it will be costly to some. It's difficult for the hospitality industry. It'd be inconvenient for some, certainly our customers. But I think Councilor Kelly was mentioning earlier on, might be a blessing in disguise. I think our customers might find out, holy cow, it's really easy to pay your bill online to the city, et cetera. And we can. And holy cow, staffers might realize it is easier to share documents electronically. And maybe we don't need to meet face to face. This video conferencing actually seems to work pretty well, et cetera. So there might even be some blessings in this and making us reflect on how we do our business.
I'd just like to add that I've done a little research on the COVID-19 virus, and the countries that are having the most success in containing the growth of the virus are doing exactly what we're doing. They're trying to practice social isolation and really, really good hygiene, and it seems to be working. And everyone thinks China is a culprit for the releasing the virus on the world, but in the end, they turned out to be somewhat heroic in that they have contained the virus in the Wuhan and neighboring cities, and they've done it by some of the same practices we're recommending here. So I guess I would recommend to the public that they take this to heart and use good hygiene practices, frequent hand washing, and also social isolation. Stay at home. That's your safest place to be. So, in as much as people can do that, I would recommend we continue to do that also.
For our public safety committee, our police and fire are developing special protocols. We'll be sharing that with you. I know you have meetings next week, but especially the fire have been very proactive in this. If you think about it, they have their platoons concentrated in a small area for extended periods of time, and they're particularly concerned about this. And we need to keep them healthy. You and I aren't going to go and put out a fire. We need our firefighters to be healthy and protect our citizens, and they very much understand that and putting protocols in place. Many of your other workers, you don't deal directly with the public, but your work still has to be done. If road pipes are broken, you need to manage your staff to make sure that they're healthy and are able to do that. I know that DPW has contingency plans in place as well for that, so. Most all of us don't have the luxury of staying at home and working from home. We're all still planning to come in if we're well and do the city's business, but we're trying to minimize the risk of them being exposed at the same time and in turn carrying it to other people as well. Any further questions? Any items on the agenda you'd like further discussion on?
Yeah, item number D, in accordance with the request of the Town Council hereby agrees to and authorizes executing MOA with New England Water Power Pollution Commission. Control Commission. What's that about?
We've got a grant from UEPIC, the Relation Foundation Program, to do a survey of the storm sewer system to see if there are any illegal sanitary sewer discharges that are getting into the storm sewer. So they're gonna set up a sampling plan to go into the storm sewers and probably check for fecal bacteria, and if they find it, then try to trace it back to a food source so we can eliminate those.
And so we would be assisting them how, just on the,
We'd be administering the project and making sure that the work occurs, and they'll be paying for all of it except for, I think, $1,500 for it.
and the items number E and F, are those, just, I guess they're continuing contracts from last year, are they the same price as they were last year, or?
Yeah. They have optional year extensions, and they decide to exercise those.
Mayor, in light of our discussion about coronavirus, I wonder if we should consider items B, C, D, E, F, and G in that light.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, people are gathering in, you know, a boat show, a lifestyle expo, a builder supply auction, and other events.
That was last
Week.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the minutes from, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Never mind.
That raises a valid point though.
Oh, yeah, there's still gonna be meetings.
Right.
Right.
We still have to figure out our protocol for the Civic Center. Obviously, limits of 20, really designed for this building here where we meet and conduct a lot of the business. We have to still figure out what we're going to do with our rec facilities to maintain the social separation. In this building, I can tell you that, as you know, we have a number of rentals of, say, the auditorium for sock hops and proms, et cetera. We've contacted those individual, or those groups. There were 4 different groups, I think, that have bookings over the next couple of months. And each group had spontaneously said, we would like to postpone those gatherings. So the groups are doing the right thing. We're kind of worried, well, geez, they're counting on that sock hop, et
Yeah.
cetera. But they're stepping up to the plate. They're not giving us any resistance. We're not saying we're canceling. We say, we think we'd like for you to reconsider holding these events. And each time they say, you're right, we'd like to suspend it. And then, of course, if they've paid some sort of a deposit for the auditorium, we'll deal with that with them in a fair way, or delay the event, et cetera. But that brings up a very good point that we're gonna have to figure out how to address.
I'd say at the very least, the public should be encouraged to stay home if they have symptoms, but even with that, you can be asymptomatic and be carrying the virus, so you need to be very careful about that.
You have in your packets a number of routine reports for the week. Can I have any additional reports, beginning with Councilor Barbell and our governance committee?
Nothing to report.
Councilor Moore on city infrastructure.
Well, we just had a meeting, so you have any new things going up?
Councilor Kelly on finance and budget.
I think we're scheduled to meet next week, and I believe Mr. Marks is on vacation. So you, Mayor, Jeff, and I will have to come up with our own agenda for that meeting.
We may be able to give you an update at that point on OpenGov. I believe they're on either already or on the verge of real-time reporting into OpenGov. Beth, do you know from your discussion with OpenGov?
They have,
Oh,
I was on a meeting Tuesday, they have loaded the budget and expense files.
Mhm.
And that's the only dashboard that's on OpenGov that's current, up through March 5th, I think it was.
Excellent. So hopefully we can report something back to your committee then. Public safety, Councilor Gibbs.
So we have a couple of meetings. Are we definitely scheduled for next Monday and Wednesday?
I've left it open, that's,
Yeah, I know you're available. Okay, so Monday and Wednesday next week, we're going to be having meetings with public safety. We're going to be putting some focus on the police department. We're doing a lot with fire, which is what brought us the MOA that brought before the council a few weeks ago. So we're going to be looking at police. We're going to spend a couple of days next week and just keep on working on that. So that's what's going on in public safety. But I have a couple of questions for Joe. So when we're done with committee reports, if you, just a couple of constituent questions I want to ask you when we're done with this.
Tonight?
Yeah. You know, when we're done with committee reports.
did you want different chiefs at these different meetings? Do you know?
No, these were supposed to be meetings with just us first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we've got some things we want to talk about, and then when we've decided on our course of action, we bring the chiefs in then.
I should report to you that the hiring for the people in the academy has now been complete. I think you remember reporting last time to you that 3 of the 4 have been hired, the 4th has since been hired as well.
Fire you're talking about.
For firefighters. Plattsburgh Public Library, Councilor Di Dominicus.
Just a quick update. I believe you, Patrick, and myself received an email from the library director about coronavirus and that they are putting steps in place following the Albany Public Library and are willing and able to do anything that the city is doing. The library is willing to help and support. So with that.
And it pretty closely parallels what we're doing, that I think we're canceling public meetings, that sort of, the operations will still continue at this point, I understand, but
Yes, I believe so.
they're trying to discourage
Matt.
large clusters.
Yep.
And MLD Board President, Councilor McFarland.
No updates.
Any other reports or discussion items people would like to have at this time? I know we've got a lot on the council agenda tonight, not in the items, but I think we've discussed most all of them, but some continued business from last week. Have a little bit of a poster board session around the room on various items that will be emerging to our boards next week and the week after. I know that each council has probably looked at a poster or two, might have some questions and comments on that, so we'll reserve that for 10 minutes if you like. Let's adjourn for another 10 minutes and
Well,
resume at
before
5.
we adjourn, can I?
Sure,
can I-
please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if Public Works needs to be part of the conversation too. So I was walking down Sanborn and engaging with my neighbors about some things, and one of the people that I spoke to on Sanborn had 2 questions that I couldn't answer. One is to know, is there an ordinance or a rule about the number of feet outside of driveway space that people are allowed to park? So we've got to look, because Sanborn, there are a lot of college students that park on that street because it's so close to the campus. And a lot of the people there can't see out of their driveways when they're trying to get, so I don't know if something exists.
Oh, so you're talking about parking on the street too close to the driveway entrance?
That's correct. Is there an ordinance on
I
it?
believe there is a regulation for that, but we probably have to check with DOT standards or.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that.
Not sure.
And typically on those streets, like for instance on Oak Street, this
when you're talking about that scenario came up, I believe last year, Mike and I looked at one where we had repeated complaints, and there was signage and markings there, just people were.
It becomes an enforcement issue.
Yeah, it's really just an enforcement issue. I can't picture on Sanborn where you would have that, but I take a look at the signage, what's there,
Yeah,
if there's signage at all.
I don't know if there is.
Okay.
Okay. And, one of the residents wanted, they had talked about getting a petition together to ask for alternate side of the street parking on Sanborn. I don't know if that,
Like during the winter or just all the time?
all the time, because their street is clogged with people who are in the college and the parking lot, they're just filling up the street, and then they can't get in or out of the driveways, and then when there's snow, it just makes it compounds the issue, and I said I could look into it, but what would that take if
So that'd be a traffic control order
hey,
by the, city planner.
it would be.
Yep, so she has the authority under the code to make those, orders. She has to go through a process to, receive input from certain public safety departments, and then she can make a order or request to the council, and the council can either adopt it or reject it.
Should the group of people, the residents who live there, is that something they should bring as petition to the council, or? Because I don't know if everybody on Sanborn wants that, it was just something that
It
came up
can
in
certainly prompt it, I
conversation.
mean, that wouldn't guarantee her action or the council's subsequent action, but that could trigger the review of that request.
Should I suggest I go in that direction first? Instead of just taking a council action, it would seem to make more sense, I mean,
Yeah, see if they actually ask for it, yeah.
okay, all right, those were my questions.
Those are your questions for me?
That, well, I wasn't sure if that was you or not.
You did a great job though.
Made a few moves.
One thing we had to explore, when we were initially talking about the resident parking in the downtown, was whether we're allowed to have resident-only parking designated. And from what it sounds very desirable in a situation like yours, but if I recall, to have a city to have resident-only parking actually has to have state legislature approval, so it's not as simple as us just saying resident-only parking.
Thank you.
Any further items you'd like to discuss? Let's resume in 5 minutes. Thank you. Can you stay there and just do hand sign?
Listen, before we post this,
Jeff, are we gonna get a copy of that? I don't have a fresh copy of that law. So, Colin Prince would give to you?
Are you comfortable going that high in salary?
what was the latest?
Talk to Dean a little bit. Civil service didn't restrict us in this, but obviously you have to be careful of running afoul of it.
I'll get together.
You don't need a fax, it just, it is.
That's how should be running, that's their off to the left-hand side.
No, well, after, to make sure it's approved, I just want to give it to you.
Yeah.
Just sign it.
You want me to hang on?
Today. Yeah, you have to do it tonight before you leave, because you gotta get it out. But I just thought I'd get you, and then don't do it until, you know, it's done. But it's
Oh,
right
yes,
there.
I just gotta get rid of the agenda, that's what you said. Okay, you know, I
So
got
I'm
it.
just giving it to you now, in case you have time.
They are.
You know, so you just sign here, and I fill everything out, you're gonna sign it. Everything. Yeah, there's 8. Well, my little.
No, I'll remember. So, text I got. So can we get that information from
That's the community policing, because that was one of the questions you guys were asking about too.
Yeah, so about that Water Street office. Yeah, that was one of those questions. Can we get that information by Monday? Okay, thanks.
You get that email laundry list?
Yes, yes, no, it's good.
Potential issues. That's why.
Good for you then.
I am, thank you.
Did you sign twice there?
I did.
Oh,
Believe
good.
it or
I
not.
have this set up.
I know it's a lot of character for me, but I did.
I mean,
Having Mike take the whole week, but
I'll just tell him, he just has to say that. We're here.
Well, it's, yeah, I'm sure they'll move them eventually. Maybe not.
I don't know. I love this, by the way. This is new, right?
I thought the press release conference went well.
You did?
First, there a lot of news. That's where he was saying. He was saying that it's too bad that he didn't have his press conference. I think it would be good for the mayor to do a 5-minute overview of what he was saying.
Yeah. During your time?
I'd like to see if we can get it edited and put these pictures on your marriage on Facebook. City website.
yeah, I will, and if they don't give us enough clips that we could do that, she's asking if we can, but I'll just do her as a presentation.
You may want to succinct
I just like this.
each of these.
This is
Very good picture.
this one especially.
That's not my favorite one, actually. Where's my favorite one?
Which
Where
one
is
was
this? Yeah, that's good.
between Social Security.
This one, the bottom one is my favorite one. It really shows that it's just not out of scale, especially compared to the building right across the street from it.
It just doesn't show the green path through.
Yeah, I know, it was,
This is a parking lot, I think it's a little smaller.
I asked them to try to get the green path through there, but they couldn't get it.
And then it's,
You don't feel safe.
I would really love to see that shows the path along the bridge.
There was one, they've got one of those somewhere.
It was
No,
just
that's
a
the
green,
angle, I like the one right over
I think
there.
it was just a green space, wasn't it?
But no, you had a picture of how the riverfront would actually look like, a rendering of the riverfront.
This is one of the drawings that's here, as I say, it's over above Dean's Head.
Oh, yeah. And then you had one from the back of the building too. There's one from the back of this building along the river.
Oh, yes, yeah, that Prime has, we have that upstairs, we can always bring that down. But yeah, so that would be looking at pedestrian.
Okay, I just didn't catch that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that's what it
It's
was.
It's raw metal. Yeah.
Young kids, if they're staying in that building.
Yeah, or anyone really, because that building. Yeah, and then there's another one looking from the other side, more towards Bridge.
I saw, I see.
Then you saw
I see.
This one is beside your page.
I put it on the website as like a news flash, but like on the front page, so you go and it's like
So this is the parking.
312 mayor conference, press conference, and just
Right.
one sentence saying mayor had a press conference.
I was looking it up today, I just couldn't make it to town, so I was like, I figured out.
It's okay, it's fun.
Facebook, you know,
I think the thing where you the public to have that view than just hearing whatever comes from the media or just the random screenshots, because at least they can hear what he's saying, and then whether they agree with it or disagree, they can go from there. That's right. At least they hear. It helps it, so whether like, once again, if you've never seen this image before, you like it, you hate it, at least you see it and you hear one side.
If they don't have a good camera, you can rent one. Professional camera. He did get the copy of the tape. Okay. Give him the video. So that's gonna be a lot of editing.
Whoops, I think it's time to begin.
2 left.
There we go, 1, 2. Ready for the meeting, folks? Let's begin tonight's meeting with a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Council Barbell,
Here.
Council Kelly,
Here.
Council Gibbs. Here. Council DeDominicis,
Here.
Council McFarland.
Here.
Council Moore.
Here.
One thing I want to remind everybody is just to speak up louder because you're not as close to the mics as you were before. Speak louder.
And I know we have a very fascinating agenda tonight. Some of the more perceptive among you might notice that the room is laid out a little bit differently than usual. This is obviously part of our coronavirus response for the city. I'm putting into place at 8 a.m. on Monday morning a protocol and emergency order for the city of Plattsburgh to try to optimize social distancing, consistent with all the best advice we're getting from the state, from the CDC, from some of the examples we're seeing from SUNY colleges, from the school districts, et cetera. And we're trying to set the example of trying to do all of our business for the city without any change in the business we conduct, but try to get smarter, try to use electronic means better, and try to ensure that all of our participants have that minimum recommended 2-meter separation as well. We're particularly mindful of the number of people coming in and out of City Hall on an hourly and daily basis. It means there's a lot of potential for the people from the public to come and infect our staff. We want to protect them, obviously, but then our staff in turn coming and infecting many people that follow throughout the day and come and visit. So these are protocols to try to increase the rate of cleaning of guardrails and countertops, et cetera, protect our employees, separate our customers a little bit, and encourage as much of our business to go online as we possibly can, including guidelines for CDC guidelines for how we use our rooms in public spaces. You'll be hearing a lot more of that. The media has been covering this and is very interested in what we're doing as well. And we're not mandating the public needs to act in any different way except in their interaction with the city and city officials. But we do hope we're also setting an example for broader communities, and we see that they're receptive. You saw what the community college and the SUNY college did yesterday across the system, and what the various school districts in Clinton County are doing, what the hospital's doing, and now what this city and our sister city in the village of Saranac Lake actually is doing as well. So that explains the arrangement. Our staff are working today and tomorrow to do these protocols, and are coming up with very imaginative ways to keep the continuity with the public and also continuity of their operation should any of their staff become ill. And they're concentrating on that over the next few days and rolling out a number of procedures for Monday morning. So that explains why this room looks a tiny bit different than it normally would. This is, by the way, going to be in effect for as long as necessary, including if we need to make additional emergency orders to do this. We hope that this pandemic, at least in our area, will abate in the next month or two. That's the hope. And in the meantime, we're going to try to protect as many lives as we possibly can, especially the most vulnerable population, the aged, make sure that they aren't infected through any mechanism that may have involved our officials, our staff, or our city hall. Thank you. Please continue.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on March 5th, 2020 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs and second by Councilor Moore. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending March 11th, 2020 in an amount of $501,549.01 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You offered your various committee reports during our work session a moment ago. Are there any additional reports like to be given at this time? Seeing none, resolved the reports as listed are hereby received and written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Moore and second by Councilor Barbell. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. No correspondence or recommendations from boards at this time. Please continue.
Resolved that the bills offered by the Common Council for the week ending March 13th, 2020 in the amount of $757,532.59 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Barbell and second by Councilor Moore. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You all, I hope, had received an agenda on your way in. Are there any members of the public who'd like to please come address the council on any issues on the agenda tonight, knowing there'll be another public comment period into the meeting for general concerns? Seeing none, please continue.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the February 27th, 2020 proposal from HydroSource Associates in the amount of $29,600 is hereby approved and authorized.
Moved by Councilor, I was going to count on Councilor Gibbs and Councilor Barbell. Any discussion?
Yeah, John, remind me what HydroSource, what the proposal is?
They're gonna be doing geophysical surveys around the Mead watershed. We've identified a number of areas out there. We're gonna explore a couple more to make sure we're optimizing the potential for big yielding wells.
That's good.
Roll call?
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Kelly?
Yes.
Council Gibbs?
Yes.
Council DeDominicis?
Yes.
Council McFarland?
Yes.
Council Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves that the March 2nd, 2020 amendment number 1 to the Footbridge Sewer Capacity Agreement with CDM Smith be approved in the additional amount of $30,000, and its execution is hereby authorized.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Moore. Discussion? Roll call?
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Kelly?
Yes.
Council Gibbs?
Yes.
Council DeDominicis?
Yes.
Council McFarland?
Yes.
Council Moore?
Yes.
Approving access and maintenance.
Beth, I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading and move to resolution.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Barbell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on the item itself. Seeing none, roll call?
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Kelly?
Yes.
Council Gibbs?
Yes.
Council DeDominicis?
Yes.
Council McFarland?
Yes.
Council Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council hereby agrees to and authorizes executing the MOA with the New England Water Pollution Control Commission and Lake Champlain Basin Program for financial assistance performing an illicit discharge detection and elimination study.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor DeDominicis. Discussion? Roll call?
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Kelly?
Yes.
Council Gibbs?
Yes.
Council DeDominicis?
Yes.
Council McFarland?
Yes.
Council Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves the contract number 2017-14 laboratory services at Water Resource Recovery Facility be extended for 1 year as listed below. BODC BOD testing award to
The way
Entire.
we're reading on this one in item number F, and it's a resolution on both items.
Moved by Counselor McFarland, second by Counselor DeDominicis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Discussion on items E and F. And you had an opportunity to discuss that also in committee earlier. Roll call?
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor DeDominicis?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yeah.
Counselor Moore?
Yes,
Resolved that the common council of the city of Plattsburgh concurs with the request by the mayor and authorizes the clerk of the common council as well as the mayor to sign a home rule request in support of Senate Bill S.7614, Assembly Bill A.10028, in support of a special state law to allow the county of Clinton and in addition the city of Plattsburgh to have a land bank.
Moved by Counselor Gibbs, second by Counselor Barbell. Discussion? Again, we discussed this in work session. Roll call?
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor DeDominicis?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Abstain.
Do I give a reason for your abstention?
Yeah, it was against the preceding prior votes, with our own land bank and law department of the county. It's really a strong opinion here, but I'm gonna abstain.
Counselor Moore?
yes,
Oh, item 7H was added during the committee agenda.
I have a resolution here to pass out to councilors, and it has changed as recently as 4:45, I guess, so you might want to read it again.
Do you want me to read it?
It's lengthy.
I wouldn't mind hearing that Tennessee drawl for reading the resolution.
Well, then you certainly will, Mayor. Okay. I will read it then, if you're, with your permission. Oh, and I have some for the audience as well. How are you, Mark? Better keep one for myself, okay? Please observe the 6-foot rule if you don't mind.
Well, then please read nice and loud for us.
Pardon?
Then please read nice and loud for us.
Oh, I will.
Yeah,
I certainly will.
can't see it.
Yes, thank you for that
I
reminder.
can share mine too, if you want to pass up.
Thank you.
Okay. Resolution, whereas the city of Plattsburgh proposed a concept in 2016 to secure a first-round downtown revitalization grant from the state of New York. Whereas the city was awarded the DRI grant in May of 2016 based on a concept to build retail and residential space in the Durkee Street lot, along with partial access to the Saranac River, a green corridor, and a sculpture and performance park. Whereas Mayor Calnon appointed a local planning commission in 2016 to develop a plan from the initial concept with the assistance of consultants appointed by Empire State Development. Whereas the local planning commission met for 6 months, conducted numerous public forums, and contacted a number of developers. Whereas the local planning commission concluded that the market could not bear 50,000 square feet of new commercial space down without significant financial assistance, and instead recommended a market rate residential emphasis, an arts walk and sculpture garden in the West Telecom Park across Durkee Street, and numerous other modifications to make the original plan workable and marketable. Whereas the city addressed the failure of the original concept to propose alternative parking to replace the initially proposed 50,000 square feet of commercial space that the city concluded could not be accommodated economically within the Durkee parking lot footprint, and developed a 1-for-1 parking replacement plan in the downtown area through the expansion of new lots downtown funded by a different state grant, ways not inconsistent with the plan approved by the Empire State Development. Whereas one developer, a company based in Cohoes with similar developments in other North Country and Central New York communities, responded with a proposal, whereas Prime Plattsburgh agreed to develop the land to create a mixed-use residential and commercial facility, a green space and extension of the Arts Walk in the form of a pedestrian walkway, expanded access to the Saranac River Trail, ample parking for all the needs of residents and patrons, and 50 parking spots available for the public on the Durkee footprint. Whereas each of these various steps were endorsed unanimously by the respective common councils over the years, whereas the negotiations between the funding agency and the developer resulted in a contract between Empire State Development and Prime Plattsburgh. And therefore, be it resolved that the Common Council continues to support the original submission of the DRI concept, the plan is modified by the local planning committee and the consultants appointed by Empire State Development, the granting of a contract to Prime Plattsburgh, and the participants in 102 public forums, consultants, and previous common councils, and the work performed in incorporating public comment and generating the generic environmental impact statement subject to any additional environmental review, in the firm belief that the Durkee Street project, the Arts Walk, the expanded Saranac River Trail, the downtown grants program, the developments at the harbor side, the parking plan for 1-for-1 parking replacement in the downtown area, and the signage and branding project for downtown Plattsburgh are all projects in the best interest of the residents of Plattsburgh and will ensure the city's ability to continue to garner economic development funds for the state of New York to enhance the quality of life in the city of Plattsburgh.
Thank you. So that's moved by Councilor Kelly, presume. We need a second. Councilor Gibbs, discussion.
Is the public permitted to comment at this point?
No.
No, not to public comment.
I guess I had just some thoughts. I'm sorry that I don't know how to do this properly. I don't mean to speak with my back to you guys, but if I don't, I speak my back.
Not much option.
Anyway, so I guess, I think, I'm conflicted about this, this resolution a little bit. And I guess I just wanted to, a couple of things, and certainly open for if anyone, has any information that they can share, that would be great. As far as the overall sort of outline of what happened, I know a lot of work went into this for a long time, so, I certainly acknowledge that, and I know Community Development Office and previous councils and a lot of work has gone into that, so, I certainly don't want to take away from that. But I do think, a couple of things regarding the local planning commission. So the LPC did come together, they met for 6 months. It was a lot of people, maybe, I don't know, 15 or, there's a long list of people that are on that original planning committee. And I think the original plan and what was originally, so the local planning committee met, and then a draft proposal was sent to New York State. That proposal is what New York State determined where the money went at the end of the day. The city had put forward 15 projects or so, the local planning commission, and of those 15 projects, the 10 that we've been discussing over the last couple of years, or the city has been discussing, being new to the council, I wasn't part of those discussions. Anyway, the local planning committee did, and what was awarded in, I believe, 2017 from the state was a smaller residential footprint, the 50,000 square feet that is mentioned here, and I think it was an acre of green space, and that was one of among 10 different projects, which included the Arts Walk, the DGP, which is the Downtown Grants Program, which is to help additional existing buildings to renovate the rebranding of the city. That was part of the original award. So those 10 awards did come through. And I think that the council over time has, as you have said, in just following what the council has done, certainly approved and moved the projects forward. The DGEIS, I was here for that, part of one of the first few things that I was here for, and as far as the process goes, that was part of that, and that was that was done well according to process. I think I think this just kind of, for me, lumps everything together in a way that takes away from some of what I've been hearing from some of the folks that have talked to me about the project. And I think that, of course it centers around Durkee Street and what that means, and so I think this resolution, in its entirety like this, it's either a yes or a no, you agree with all of this or you agree with none of this, and I think the arguments are a little bit more nuanced than that, and I guess that's just where, I don't want to take away from the work that's been done for certain.
What are some of the nuanced arguments?
Well, I mean, I guess it really comes down to what that city center and that Durkee Street parking lot originally was part of, and where that changed along the way, and how that changed along the way. And again, I wasn't part of those things, but that's what I'm hearing is sort of as it's proposed now, the Durkee Street is where there seems to be the most conflict. But as far as this resolution is concerned, I think that all the other things put in with that make this resolution a bit muddy for me. And that's sort of.
So you like less resident, well, so here's how I think I remember it, right? Because there was 15 projects put forth. Originally they asked for, I think, over $5 million in funds from the state as part of the DRI for the Durkee Street development. They only granted like 4.3. But there was and I get confused when people say plans, because there wasn't really plans. There was ideas and rough outlines, and the plans were supposed to be put forth by developers in response to the RFP. And certainly there was a lot of backlash then. I believe the council got like a petition with 2,000 signatures almost of people against that plan. A local group, Strong Towns, was showing up to the council, and this was right when I first became a part of the council. And they had this big push online of one of those ideas, and a picture of it online that says, "Let's talk," because they didn't like that proposal. The DGIS specifically outlined the proposal, I think, with the 50,000 square feet of commercial space and 46 apartments, and found it to be financially unfeasible, unable to generate an internal rate of return that would attract a developer. And so I guess the change would be, right, there was no response to the RFP that was in line with that, right?
Yeah.
How many I remember the original proposal for the RFP. You said correctly, the original, the concept, and by the way, the concept said not to ask for an RFP that had 45 units in 50,000 square feet. It said roughly that may approximately have 45 units, 50,000 square feet, opening up the door for what the development community actually could produce, but, can somebody help me recall how many, apartments did the developer originally propose?
I think it was 121.
I thought it was 200.
I think it was over 200, and there were 2 buildings.
127 was the original number.
127, then they proposed another one, I think up to
There was an
like
expansion,
150,
and that pushed
147.
up to 140, I don't remember that last number, but 140 something. And then further public inputs resulted in further modification and a reduction in the number of residential units to its current number of 115.
But
With
even
underground
so-
parking. I mean,
Yes.
the parking garage being built below ground makes the overall project that much more expensive for the developer to finance. And that was in response to community complaint that, this second poster right here that's on the wall is its current rendition. And so one of the design proposals was to move the building project farther over, and there was public outcry that there wouldn't be enough parking there, would close off the entire parking lot, so they went back and they created a design that would include underground parking, which now makes it very expensive for them to build. Every rendition that this company has come up with has been in response to the public forums that we have held. And this most current one, you can see, opens up a section of the Durkee Street lot, and it creates a pathway down to the river from that arts park. And they have to be able to construct a project that is going to give them the rate of return. They have to. If it's not financially feasible for them, then the project will not succeed. And we need to understand that this project, if they're going to invest in it, if it's going to be this public-private partnership, it needs to succeed. I think that as consternation continues to roil in the public, fueled by lies and misinformation, it is incumbent on us as a council to confront those things and to call them what they are. As I'm operating in my neighborhood, I'm walking around last weekend and I'm engaging with my neighbors, I see the flyers that are posted on people's doors and they're filled with lies. And so I've addressed those things. This is a good project that has been vetted, it's been discussed, we've had a lot of open forums. Yes, there is disagreement. There is, and I recognize that. The way I envision this to bring the downtown area the kind of infused economy that we've envisioned, I understand fully that there are residents in my neighborhood who don't agree with me, and I take responsibility for that. We have gotten so far into the process now that to change this final rendition again is not a good idea. Because if this falls through, as I know some people would like it to be, then what does that mean for Plattsburgh? That means a lot of other projects fall through as well. That means we won't see another $10 million grant for my lifetime. And what does that mean for the city? And those are the real consequences on the table right now. And what this resolution does, and I understand what you're saying, because you're trying to weigh the public, distrust or maybe their complaints over the process, the project, and so on. But there are real consequences here, lasting consequences to the city, because there are a lot of people who would like to see this fail, and I think that's wrong.
Well, and there's two forms of public opposition. Some don't want any, that was how it was originally. When I was first on the council, there's a lot of people upset that the state awarded $4.3 million to that project. They wanted it spread out over other projects, or more. More wanted more increase for the DGP, and I think some other projects. Then seems to be the other opposition that's arisen more recently is people that can conceive of better projects, I guess, in their mind, or they have an idea of what they would like to see. But remember that we only got one response to the RFP. It was unanimously approved by the PAC, which had opposition members appointed to it, which included business leaders and other people of the community. and was well liked. I remember the first time Prime presented in this room, I didn't hear a whole lot of public opposition. Certainly the people that were opposed to any construction going on the site, when I went and talked to them in November of 2018, I said if you have problems with it, we can try to make changes. None of them came forward. I didn't remember really much public opposition until the Save Durkee Street parking lot people started protesting in April. But a lot of them seem to have problems with the earlier rendition too, or not even an earlier rendition, the earlier ideas. The most outspoken member of that group, I think her name's Sylvie, she's come in and complained that there's too much commercial space in this new proposed development, which is about 10,000 square feet. The old, what you're talking about with 46 apartments, that has 50,000 square feet of commercial space. So if we can't fill up 10,000 with 114 apartments above it, adding to demand, how are we gonna fill 50,000 square foot of commercial space? Certainly there's arguments for more green space too. And I know there's been changes to sort of widen the Arts Walk down to the River Walk, more incorporate the new park going in at the West Elcom Park, or the improvements going in at the West Elcom Park. Certainly the council last year was really focused on bringing more, and we're still focused on, I hope, bringing in more leisure activities down at the harbor side. Certainly I've been saying I want a dog park there, I want a playground there. People have talked about splash pad. Mike always talked about a picnic pavilion, which, and obviously the farmer's market's going in on there. So we want to generate activities down there, and especially recreation for our city members down there. And certainly this doesn't have an acre of empty green space or anything like that, but we got to remember that this was the project put forth. This was the project that a developer decided that they could put forth and make work here, and we haven't seen any others. There was only one response to the RFP. We haven't heard any responses from other people of what might actually work here. The original strategic investment plan that was done in 2016 talked about they wanted over $5 million of DRI funds, that the project would cost over $30 million, that they expected $19 million to come from private funds, and the rest would be made up in a pilot in Restore New York grants and Main Street New York grants. But there was a big gap there that needed to be addressed. Fortunately, Prime's decided to put more, garner more private assets than the 19 million. The project is coming in at less than 30 million. And it's finally at a point where it could be feasible, but I look at the GEIS that says that original idea, if it had been followed completely and all those wish list items have been put in, it would have been economically unfeasible, and that worries me. And even, I think it was a Durkee Street Reimagined or one of the other things, back then said even then it would require some nifty marketing to get an initial rate of return. It was up to the point where they thought a bank might finance it, but they weren't sure a developer would come in and get an actual or the necessary rate of return to actually take the risk to build a building. So I'm glad that we have something in here that the developer thinks can be successful and that they can make work.
I think that's really helpful in correcting correcting a lot of misinformation that's out there. One thing you brought to our attention is the issue of parking, and when we talk about having replacement parking throughout the downtown, people have then come back from that group and said, well, yeah, but you've also got increased parking demand from people living in this building. Remember, the 225 additional spaces are being built by this company underground, raising the costs as you've identified for that very purpose. So there's a net huge increased number of spots. 225 are built more than are required for them to take care of their needs. So every time that a concern is addressed, the developer in 3 different iterations now has come up with some sort of solution for it in what I consider to be a pretty proactive way. Whether that solution met each one of our individual criteria every single time, perhaps not, but I can't at all fault them for really trying to listen through multiple iterations to the point where, geez, I hope they're sharpening their pencil really hard, because it's making their exercise and the rate of return that's necessary to produce this more and more difficult all the time. And what I think is a pretty sincere effort to try to really meet the public's needs far more than just halfway. And one other short comment, in the original concept, which I think we now recognize wouldn't give them the space to create the rate of return to have a successful project, there was a little bit more green space, much less development actually along the river than there is now. They're doing a much better job. We're actually making the Saranac River Trail follow the Saranac River. What a broad, or what a bizarre concept, but it's actually following the Saranac River, which is wonderful.
And there's gonna be bridges, and there's gonna be connectivity, and this
Yeah.
is part of a resolution that we agreed on, I think that was, what, 2 weeks ago,
That's right.
right? It's gonna be
And,
beautiful.
and all that sculpture park and the water fountain features, et cetera, is still there. It's across the street. It's now we've developed the West Talcon Plaza to have all these various features as well, in a way that continuously bring people all the way from the Strand public space, through the West Talcon public space, through the green space, to the river. So all the elements people have been asking, they might not be exactly here, but now they're right across the street over here, et cetera. So this is part of the evolution of this, to really try to make it work for as many people as possible simultaneously. So yeah, does it fit any one of our visions absolutely identically? Probably not. But does it address everything that we've expressed as a concern or interest? I think so, personally.
Just, go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I just had just a couple of comments. I guess it's, yeah, when I came on here in January, this is pretty far along, but as I looked into it, the expectation of the $10 million DRI, which was essentially the first DRI given in New York State, was to Plattsburgh. So it's a learning experience, not just for Plattsburgh, but for New York State, as to how to do this work. But that DRI was looking for a transformative change. It wasn't to seed a few little projects in a city. It was looking at transforming in a way that you build off local assets, you bring in private investment, and you transform the downtown area. And that comes from their own language as to what their expectation was of the DRI. And I've been involved in enough change elements where when you bring transformative change, it's very common. And I really respect the comments and the concerns, and I actually consider it fairly heartfelt for a lot of people, the concerns that they have about this project. But it's extremely common that you're gonna find, if you lose any existing benefit to your community, it's seen as much more significant and important than any gain that any new initiative is going to bring. And that's a common emotional reaction to transformative change. So, I think we all have to look at this, that what we're hearing is not unusual that you're going to hear this on the council. However, I came on this council for just a couple of reasons. One, I was concerned about a balanced budget. I was concerned about providing services to people in this community that taxpayers could support. And I look at the DRI, I look at the private investment of some $24 million by a private individual or company that is coming into this community and placing a bet on this is going to transform the downtown area. And it's going to increase the tax base in the city of Plattsburgh. And it's going to increase the number of people in the downtown area. And it's going to stimulate, in my opinion, additional investment in downtown. So, I feel that the positives on this outweigh any negatives, and think that the council and your resolution, in my feeling about that is it indicates to me that the council needs to continue to push forward on this project.
Well, and to address one of Paul's concerns, I don't agree with everything in here. The first few whereases there before my time, so I don't know if that is exactly how it happened. But I've personally never been in favor of the one-for-one parking, replacement. Clearly anyone who read the parking study, it doesn't suggest replacing one-for-one, it suggests less, not much less, but a little. I was, the only counselor that wasn't in favor of the purchasing the Glens Falls National Bank parking lot, building, making that a parking lot when it came up. Although looking back and seeing how all these plans came, I understand why everyone else was in favor of it then, and I'm kind of glad they did it now, because it seems to make sense with everything. And so I've made compromise too, and I don't necessarily think I agree with every little word in there. But I look around at these pictures that have been hung up, I don't know how long they've been there, but, and I can't wait. I look at this picture, this is much better view, coming down City Hall Place, that to me is gonna be a much more vibrant downtown. It's gonna make much more economic activity down there on Durkee Street, where you really see very little of it. It makes it more walkable. We have very wide sidewalks right there. Right now, we have like a 1 foot wide sidewalk with signs coming out of it. I look at this picture over here. Now, it's a drawing, but I think of what's there now, and it's, nothing special. We don't really see the river well. There's broken boards there of a, previously attempted sort of boardwalk thing that no one uses. There's, it's just a big 289 parking spot that, or parking lot that is used, but it could be so much more. And when looking at what could be there and what is offered to be there, as opposed to what is there and how the benefit the city gets from that spot, I can't wait until it looks like this. I can't wait until we have people that can live downtown, especially looking at the vacancy rate, especially when I go around and talk to realtors, and they consistently tell me that there's not enough apartments available downtown. They don't have any apartments available downtown for people to actually rent. Knowing my own struggles finding a place to live downtown when I moved to the city and never actually succeeded, makes me understand that there's a real need for apartments downtown, and makes me really understand when constituents tell me that we need more things downtown, we need more attractions. So I actually like that there's 10,000 square foot of commercial. As long as something's beneficial put in there, we don't know exactly what will go in. But anything that can revitalize that sector of our downtown. And I know one of the ideas that the state was thinking when they gave the money for that project as opposed to the waterfront was they were hoping that it would increment development more towards the harbor and eventually lead to those areas connecting. And when I look at pictures or maps of Plattsburgh from like the late 1700s, early 1800s, that area of Bridge Street, the corner of Bridge Street and Peru Street and Green Street, that was as much downtown as the corner of Protection Alley and, or Protection Avenue rather, and Margaret Street. It's just kind of not anymore, and it's kind of sad. When we look at old pictures of where the Durkee Street lot is, the corner of Bridge Street and Durkee, that used to be buildings, a row of buildings, and it used to be a thriving part of downtown. Unfortunately, there was fires and other things that happened, and it's no longer that way, but I hope that that can be a reinvigorated part and become a central part of our downtown.
Councilor Bill, you had your hand up, I think. Councilor Moore.
Well, I wanted to get a comment in.
Sure, go ahead.
Although
Go,
mostly stole a lot of my ideas that I was gonna bring forth, but this project is intended to be transformation, and that is what it is. I can remember back when there was a building there that didn't look this good. I see this as a return to the tax rolls of this area, to bring it back to what it was. It's not something new or unusual. It was part of downtown when I was younger. And I just wanna say, with parking and everything, parking is not a destination. Patrick touched on that, it's attractions. People don't go to Walmart because they like the parking lot, they go there because they wanna buy something there. People do not go to the Great Escape because they got a nice parking lot. They go there because there's an attraction there. And this is gonna be a big attraction, drawing people to our downtown area, which is becoming much more vibrant. In just 8 years, I've seen this go from kinda sleepy to, where we've got some businesses coming in and they're expanding, they're getting better. And I think this will just continue to make our downtown better. We need the development. And it's actually redevelopment, it's not development. It's just going, returning these properties to the tax rolls, we need people. And that's what's gonna bring things and revitalize our downtown. So, in that respect, this is very transformational, and we need to continue on this, to make this happen. It's about time Plattsburgh got to advance. I've seen over the years that many holes develop in our downtown. Things have left and nothing else has come back in. We've lost many places, the whole downtown that looked entirely different back in the day. And we need to return that, the vibrancy to our downtown. It used to be the commercial center of Clinton County. It's no longer that, and it will never be that, because now what we've become is a place for people to live. And people want to live in Plattsburgh. And we need to provide the places for people to live in Plattsburgh. So I think this is a great idea, and I'm all for it.
Well, you haven't left much for me to say, but I do want to reiterate, you know, almost everything that's been said here, I agree with. And I, like Patrick mentioned, Plattsburgh was the center of the county at one time, and Jeff mentioned also. And we see trends in our nation where the interstate highways and the malls and the suburbs, well, they're on the way down, whether you like it or not. What's on the upswing in our country, fortunately, are downtowns. My wife and I love to travel, and we travel all over the Northeast. And in almost every small town our size, there is a development project like this going on. If you'd like to sometime, I'd invite you to drive over to Essex Junction, Vermont, which is a small village in Vermont. It's right smack dab in the middle of their downtown is a project that looks very much like this. I kid you not. Go look for yourself and see it. This is a trend that's happening nationwide. Do we get on board with that trend, or do we stay in the past? That's what you gotta ask yourself. And I think we got a better future if we jump on board with the trends going forward. And as everybody said, it's not really a trend at all. We're just going back to what happened before the automobile came to dominate the planet. And I'm very excited about that. A walkable city, a city where people want to live, enjoy life. The arts park, where's the arts park? The arts park and this development go hand in hand. People who live here will use the arts park. They will attract other people to use the arts park, and it will be a huge success. One of the things that I really, really do not like is that someone mentioned that this beautiful spot here you see above Dean's Head, the walkway there, they wanted to call that Danger Alley. Danger Alley. Nothing could be further from the truth. That is going to be a place where you see exactly what you see there, a place for people to join together and enjoy life. And that is exactly what you will see. That will tie into the Saranac River Trail, which will take you over to my neighborhood in the Flats, and will connect to the Monument Park across the river again. It's just a huge improvement for the city, and I don't know really what else we could do to make it much better at this point. Somebody said, well, there's going to be parking issues. I would invite you to take a close look at this diagram and see that, yes, in this plan, there's a one-to-one exchange for parking. The 289 spots that'll be lost down there will be replaced here. Somebody says, the city does not have a parking plan that will work. Nothing could be further from the truth. Take a look at this. Read all the documentation on our website. You will see we have a parking plan. Patrick mentioned the possibility of removing and eliminating some of the parking. If we become a more walkable city, then that's something we can look forward to in the future. But for now, one-to-one is necessary, most people feel. I have a dream that someday this parking lot, the Arnie-Pavone parking lot, we'll discover that, wow, we don't really need that 103 spaces anymore. We got parking all over. This might better be used for more residential area. So then we'd have, on both sides of the West Telecom Park, we could have residences. Plattsburgh's becoming more dense, okay? That's what we're looking for, more density, more people living close in. Why? Why do you want that? Why do you want that? Well, our founding fathers in 1897 or so decided that density was good. Why? Because you can put 100 residences in the same space where you put maybe 10 in the suburbs. So that saves money. You need one sewer pipe for 110. You need one water line for 110. You need electricity, fewer inputs for electricity. Building up is a very economical way to develop a city. That's the way it's been done for thousands of years. It wasn't until the car was invented that cities started spreading out. I look forward to a time when the car is not such a big deal in our country anymore. And I'd like to be at the crest of that. One final thing I'll say is that I learned a lot from this project, and I was opposed to it at first. I thought, somebody's bringing us $10 million, and it's just going to mess our city up. But then I started to see the reason behind it. We've got this beautiful, beautiful downtown here. It needs redevelopment. That's what the R stands for in DRI, redevelopment. So it's time. It's time. We don't have to be afraid of this. This is a good thing for the city. I promise you, I love this city. I would never do anything that I thought would harm the city of Plattsburgh ever. This is my forever home, and I will never leave here again. But I do believe that this is necessary. And not only necessary, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Why? Because it will attract further development. We'd like to have development, if you can picture in your mind a map of the city, all the way down Bridge Street, all the way to the waterfront. When we do that, when we achieve that certain level of density, then we can start to do things like bring in grocery stores downtown again, bring in drug stores downtown again, bring in variety stores downtown again, just like it used to be. Just like it used to be. And when that happens, folks, we'll have a city that people really want to live in. I promise you that. There is one final thing I learned, and that is that this type of project is a cooperation between residents, between the developer, and between city government. We talked about how we have to do things to attract developers. We have to do things to satisfy residents and make our city more attractive for our residents so that they want to stay. And I think we're doing it. I think we found that sweet spot between developer, community, city government. I think we found it. And it's going to be beautiful, I promise you that. Okay, thank you.
made a lot of points, actually all of you made a lot of points. It reminds me of a flyer I saw recently, which I can only conclude must have been satire, because they had this like 100-foot tall building monstrosity in the middle of our downtown. I mean, Ethan, I can't quite see that over there, but I think that's the first rendition. Would you be able to hold that up for me a little bit, the one off the left? That's the first rendition I've seen of what that building would look like, really in, boy, you're such a wonderful Havana way. It's got the wrist motion, everything. I think that's the nicest way for me to kind of picture how that's gonna look in my downtown. And if you look at the facade of that building, which has been adjusted and throughout the comments to try to look more like the look and feel of a classic Plattsburgh or northeastern town, downtown. But the height of that is just not to the same scale as some of the satire that I've seen out there. As a matter of fact, if you look at the height above lake level of the top of that facade, it's within a few feet of the highest facade point across the street on the former Merkel's building. There's a number of buildings downtown that have heights at the top that are actually taller than this building, a number of them, half a dozen of them at least. There's almost no place in the downtown except for this angle and on Bridge and Durkee Street where you'd even see this building. Even if you're on the top floor of all the other buildings downtown, you wouldn't see this structure. It's not this monstrosity that satire had suggested. It's actually something that fits very well into the scale of our downtown, is that picture more shows than anything, demonstrates than anything I've seen to now. So I think that the points that you made, Councillor, of going through the various concerns, and all the councillors going through the various concerns and addressing them in a rational way, one by one, not through hyperbole, but through diagrams and analysis and the history of what got us there, including the 102 public forums that we've held over the last few years, demonstrates that we can have a rational discussion about our future, and it doesn't need to be cynical and satirical. It can actually be factual. So I really hope that all the various points that you've all made will stick into the public dialogue instead of many of the distortions and misinformation that we've heard. And it's very hard to pull back misinformation, but I think that the good work of our Community Development Office, of the experts that have been appointed to study this issue, of the GEIS that did a very good job in trying to summarize and address all the public comments in as scientifically a way as they possibly can, is really for me what rational public discussion is all about. Any further comments? Any other discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor DeDominicis?
I'm gonna abstain from this vote, because I hear what everybody's saying and, to my original point, I guess.
Counselor McFarland?
Sure.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves John Ruff is authorized to attend the WEF AWWA fly-in on April 27th through 29th, 2020 in Washington DC at a cost not to exceed $500.
Moved by Councillor Moore, second by Councillor Gibbs. Discussion?
Just a quick question, safety and traveling, since we're talking about all of these things, just wanna make sure that we're.
Yeah, this is tentative, obviously, we're gonna have to see how things play out.
I recommend you drive.
Actually, it's probably what I'm gonna do if I do go.
Why do they call it a fly-in, John?
So most people fly in. And it's also an in and out, it's a quick in and out, quick hit with senior officials and elected officials and back out of DC.
On John's behalf, I'll tell you that whenever John attends a convention, he comes back with about 1 million good ideas, so we appreciate that.
Roll call.
Counselor Barbell?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor DeDominicis?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yeah.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Are there any resolutions for initial consideration at this time? Any new business? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I almost forgot about this. I'd like to introduce, local law P2 of 2020, amending in its entirety City Code Section 257-15C, on setting rates and enacting regulations for levy and collection of water charges. I'd like to schedule a public hearing for Thursday, March 26th at 5 p.m. to discuss the local law.
Okay. And I'd like, and I believe a copy of the local law has been given to each councillor. And I'd like to ask for Thursday, March 26th at 5:31 p.m., or just following your hearing in the Common Council Chambers, 41 City Hall Place. It'll be a public hearing.
Mayor, it's at 5:30.
Isn't his at 5:30? Oh, it's 5. Okay, so mine would be 5:30. Will be a public hearing on the proposed abandonment of Division Street, which action may result in a change of the official map of the city of Plattsburgh. Any other calls for public hearing or new business or council reports? Seeing none, are there any members of the public who would please like to come and share your views?
I just wanted to clarify one thing. I think Councilor Moore, you might have been reading from the former code section. It's actually chapter 348, section 24, I believe.
Okay. I'd like to do that then.
We'll make sure that the most updated ones are included.
Any other new business or council reports? Any closing public comments from the public? Please come forward.
Yes.
I'll keep time.
I'm very upset with the decision of the board here. One of the things is, this image is in error. I'm a scene designer, I know how to project an image. I saw that on some months ago, and I thought it had been replaced. The building that's proposed is 5 stories high. This building, the dress code, is 3 stories, count them, 11.5 feet high. Take the diagonal down to the vanishing point. This building is shown as 3 stories high when it's 5 stories. There's other information that needs to be addressed. This business of parking is one of my old saws. There isn't enough parking being replaced by destroying the Durkee Street lot. Otherwise, the parking committee wouldn't be introducing parking meters downtown. They know, I sat at the meetings, I've looked at the statements in the DEG, there's going to be a paucity of parking spaces. The third issue, when this building is being constructed, which will take 18 months, there's going to be a great loss of parking downtown. The people that are building it will need places to park, there'll be machines, there will be materials. The place will be a dead zone for 18 months or maybe 2 years, depending on if there are construction delays. These buildings, these businesses downtown can't exist with a period of 18 months to 2 years of having lowered patrons come to their places. Another infuriating thing, which was not mentioned, is the farmer market. The farmer's market was a place where there was activity on Saturdays and spillover effect downtown. It's being moved down to the sewage treatment plant, not to the water side. You can't see the water side from the farmer's market proposed site. There's buildings there from the sewage treatment plant that lock the, and it's hard to get to. Maybe that will be replaced. Some of this is our projection of what the future will be. I see this prime building as hurting downtown Plattsburgh. I'm not against construction, but this building is hurtful. It's going, and if it goes up, if the shovel hits the ground, this building goes up, Plattsburgh will never be the same. that you can repaint a street if you have diagonal parking where it shouldn't be, but you can't take that building down. It'll be up there for the rest of our lives. If it's wrong, and I have the projection that you're wrong, Mr. Kelly.
I'm
Oh,
right. I'm right.
Point of order.
Point of
It
order, we
says
don't
Mike
address
Kelly right there.
individual counselors.
We don't address.
But I would say that I shouldn't address anyone. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak for my 2 minutes.
Any other individuals, please come forward.
Sort of as a follow-up, you have all painted this as wonderful, glowing, fabulous. And I will point out, you correctly said there are lies out there, there's spin out there, there's untruth, and a lot of it is coming out of this room. And yes, it's true. You had 102 meetings where you met with the public, but this is not what the public wanted. Now, that you've all given yourselves a pat on the back for what a great job you've done and how glowing this project is and what wonderful thing it's going to do, let me be a bit of a wet blanket. Let's look down the road to this. First off, let's see what might transpire if Prime decides that it's in need of more than 1.3 parking spaces per apartment. That's just not enough for their tenants. They need more space. Well, they have 50 spaces. It doesn't belong to the city, it belongs to them. The city has access to it. We agreed, that we can use it, great. But because they own the property, they can charge anything they'd like. They decide they really need more room for their tenants. They'd be able to fill their building better if they had more room for the tenants. So what we're gonna do is, what Prime says is we're gonna charge $20 an hour. Who's gonna park there? You can either have a permit and you can park for free, which, by the way, if you're a tenant in their building, there's one parking permit per apartment, but if you would like to pay $100 a month additional, you can park in the lot, provided there's a space. Well, all you have to do is set the price for the public parking high enough, and there will be space. So that hasn't fixed that problem, if they decide that they want spaces for their permit holders. My question to you is, what would Plattsburgh's response be when Prime says, after 20 years of reduced taxes, our occupancy levels are so low that we need to have another 10 years of reduced taxes in order to make it worth our while to stay? Well, they're so big that that's a threat. The subtext here is that we're going to pull out if we don't get additional goodies thrown our way. If they were serious about a long-term commitment, which you assure us that, they're gonna be here for the long term, that's fine. Let us stipulate that they have to stay 20 years after their pilot expires so that we have an opportunity to get our money back as residents. And if they do not do so, their tax breaks are due immediately upon selling or leaving. And if they're going to declare bankruptcy, then the parent company will be liable for what they did not pay in taxes. Finally, if Prime should declare bankruptcy and leaves, we have a huge building right at the heart of downtown. So how much is the cost to repurpose this building, and what are we going to repurpose it for? How much will it cost to keep that building in shape? And you don't want to look at these questions because you're so convinced that this is a really positive project and it's not going to fail. But if it does, it's going to fail big, and it's going to leave a big hole in the center of downtown. So how much will it cost to keep our building in shape? Well, has anybody been to the Crate Center lately? Seen what that looks like? How great a job Plattsburgh has done at keeping that together. It hasn't. What I'm worried about is I see this as Plattsburgh's Hotel Flanagan. We unwisely built unneeded apartments, unneeded retail space, while sacrificing easy access downtown. If we started small, and you agree, nobody wants to touch this small, well, maybe if we downsize it enough, we could get some local people interested. Let's build it in phases. So if it doesn't go, we don't have this whole huge thing that just collapsed in our face. And furthermore, let's go back to the citizens to get what they want, because this project is not what people wanted, even though they went to 102 meetings to try and express what they were most interested in. This is not it.
Mr. Miller, is that true that the developer can charge whatever they want for the 50 public spaces there?
Prime's intention is to mirror the city's parking enforcement regime to as practicable a degree as possible. So the idea that they would consider charging $20 an hour is not feasible, because if they could charge $20 an hour there and yet the city was charging $1 an hour 2 blocks away, why would anybody pay to park in that lot?
Precisely, and you say that's their intent.
There's a
Get
point
it
of
on
order,
paper.
point of order.
Get it on paper, if that's their intent.
Please.
My turn?
Yes.
Thank you. I've been to a number of these meetings, and I've heard a lot from Prime. They've come back and they've said, okay, people said they didn't like this, so we've done this, and people didn't like this, and we've done this, and they presented different plans. So there are a lot of plans here, and we've seen what they want. What we haven't seen, assuming that we have this beautiful building, some people call it beautiful, we have a good idea what it's going to look like. We have a good idea what the surrounding area is going to look like. What none of us, I don't know if you folks have it, but none of us have any idea what it's going to look like on the inside. And I think that needs to be considered. When I was at the Clinton County Planning Board meeting, and one of the reps from Prime had talked about the rental rate being $1,200 a month, the market rate, for a one-bedroom apartment. Now, at that point, I think the question was put to her by Professor Hui. And then she stopped, and I think what she was waiting for was for the Prime rep to say, and here's what it's going to cost, the market rate for a 2-bedroom, here's what it's going to cost for a 3-bedroom. But she didn't say anything. And so they sort of passed on. And I never hear more than the $1,200 rate for a 1-bedroom apartment. And I don't know why Prime doesn't want to give that information. I'm not saying they don't want to, maybe they just don't think it's important, but they didn't go there. And so I got to thinking, they're going to ask for $1,200 for the first month's rent, and they're also going to ask for a security deposit, and we don't know what that security deposit is. So it's not going to cost $1,200 for somebody just to get in there. It's going to cost more than that. And then I wondered, how much square footage are you going to get for $1,200 a month? And I'm not assuming it's going to be too little or too much. I don't know, because I haven't seen any plans. Have you? I don't know if you've seen any plans, but I think you need to get that information from Prime. You need to get it for the 1-bedroom, the 2-bedroom, the 3-bedroom. And you also need to ask about storage space, because they said they want to attract new people, they want to attract empty nesters, and they want to attract senior citizens. And empty nesters and senior citizens who are moving from a house are bringing their whole lives with them. Now, they're going to try to get rid of stuff, but we are the stuff we accumulate over life, and we need a place to put it. And if you're going to charge a whole lot of money for an apartment, and you don't have any storage space, or you don't have adequate storage space, or somebody wants to come in who only needs a 1-bedroom to live in, a pair of old geezers like us, but then they need another bedroom for their stuff, well, that may make it a little more expensive than people want to pay, okay? Now, they also said the amenities. They're going to have a gym. Anybody know how big that gym is? What kind of equipment it's going to be able to handle? How many of the tenants are going to be able to use that gym at any given time? How many people are going to be able to access the outdoor courtyard? How they're going to be able to use it? None of this has been addressed. There are no plans that I've seen that would give us any idea what somebody's going to get for the money that Prime wants them to pay. And as Ms. Gibbs says, they need a rate of return in order to succeed. So you want to get that apartment building filled. You want 115 signatures, as many close to that as you can get on the leases. And you want people who are going to stay there and pay those rents month after month after month after month. But if they get in there and they decide, looks nice on the outside, but I don't know, it's like, it's not enough storage, or I can't get into the gym. Okay, then the one other thing, what's their pet policy? People love their pets. Do you think you could shoehorn Omar comfortably into a one-bedroom apartment down there? I don't know. But if you had the option, you'd get a house. You did that, that was your option. So, you know, people are gonna wanna bring pets, they're gonna wanna have storage, and they may not be willing to pay these rents to try to get that if they can get it somewhere else. Thank you.
I think Ms. Palkovich was referring to your dog, which weighs, what, 150, 200 pounds?
It's like 140.
Carol Klepper. I didn't really come prepared for this meeting because it wasn't on the public website that you were going to talk about it. And part of the problem is when we talk about transparency, I live on 17 Couch. I live in walking distance of this. I've always been a proponent of developing the Durkee Street lot with mixed use, but also green space and sufficient parking for the restaurants and downtown businesses that live downtown. This is all up in my head. What I'm opposed to is that I don't care what Prime promises you. Look at College Suites, Broad Street Commons. They promised that they were going to pay their taxes. They promised that they were going to get X. They promised they were going to bring this to the city. Once a project fails or they're not getting what they want as a rate of return, they come back to the city. Then the city has to fight to get them to pay the taxes. They reduce the taxes. That reduces our assessment roll and taxes that we rate. So let's not even talk about the pilot program where we have 18, 20 years of preferred tax rates. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole other issue. What I'm opposed to is that we have 3.3 acres. I didn't even bring accurate pictures, I mean, big enough for everybody to see. We have 3.3 acres in the Durkee Street lot. We're going to get 14 feet along the top of the riverbank of the Saranac River for a Saranac River Trail. I think it's great for connectability. I think it's great to have this vision that people are going to come downtown. I walked downtown last weekend. I hurt my foot. I haven't been able to walk much. But I met several people that were from out of town. They all came to restaurants. They said the reason they came downtown, they love the food. They're older. They can park right in front. The tenants that live downtown, I spoke to several businesses that have downtown tenants. They're not signing leases because they're worried that they're going to have parking. So when we talk about one-to-one, and I've gone to parking meetings, and I was the one, walkability, I walk, people should walk. They're not close enough to people have to bring groceries, et cetera. I'm saying that Prime even said at their last meeting, and we don't have a recent rendition of what the project's going to look like. The county meeting that I went to, when they were asked, is this what this is going to be? Well, kind of, we're not sure, we're still in formulation. I get that, they're ready to develop. But the farmer's market and the space around the farmer's market, I say the city retained. There's no reason that Prime can't, they're getting 4.3 million, almost half of our 10 million grant money. And by the way, Cuomo, I've listened throughout the cities where he's doing the revitalization and joint effort between public and private, and they said the same thing, is that the city kept some of the center of whatever was going to be developed. And I'm asking the city to think about this because that is not accurate. That's not what they're building. That's terrific. This is what they're building. I've seen it. It's aluminum siding, and the top of the building looks like a warehouse. Where I have a building along J Street where we got warehouses, those look better than what this is proposed. What was proposed by the Downtown Revitalization Committee and other people was a joint space, some green space for the city residents to use, not owned by Prime or a developer, because I'm a landlord. And if, God forbid, I need more space, I own the property. I'm going to take it. I'm going to justify why I need that space. So Prime even said at various meetings, he's going to try to work with the city to give the complimentary, they're supposed to be compensant, I can't even pronounce it. They're supposed to provide sufficient parking on site for the public if we need it for access. And he said that if his tenants need it, then he's not going to block it off. He's not going to say, here's a city key to any resident that wants to go to those 50 spots. If his tenants or the visitors need those spots, they're gonna do it. It's not a 1.5 ratio that his tenants have for parking, it's less than that. If you have a one-bedroom, I'm a landlord, everybody that's a couple, they have 2 cars. I'm all for promoting walking. This is not a walkability city just yet. We don't have public transportation. So elderly people or people, even young people, bring 2 cars, each apartment, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, there might be 3. There's nothing to say, okay? So the city proposed, the DRI committee proposed that it complement the architecture that's downtown, not what this is. So I asked the city to work with the residents and the businesses that live and are going to stay here. I'm going to stay 3 blocks, 5 blocks from this project. It's 100 feet from grade. It's not, that is not accurate. 5 stories, if you measure, and I asked at the next meeting that prime measure from the ground level up. 5 stories is about 100 feet right against the river. The problem with the Durkee Street is that making it only one way with loading trucks and not making it pedestrian friendly. You cannot do angle parking. I lived in Montreal for 7 years. It doesn't work. Asking the city, please, you can work with Prime. You can say it's not too late. We love you. Come and build, but we need to keep 100 feet along the east side for an actual Saranac River trail where people can sit and enjoy the Saranac River, not feel like they're walking against a 100-foot wall or a 65 wall, 50-foot wall, I don't care. And then,
5.5 minutes.
okay, and 100 feet along Bridge Street for a wide enough sidewalk, and 100 feet so we can have parallel parking against the side that your Durkee Street parking lot, and actually have people able to drive both ways with loading trucks. Please, this is our chance to revitalize our downtown, not kill it. Bringing residents and tenants to live, but also sharing with and promoting our downtown. Thank you.
Any other members, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Marty Martin, and although I don't live in the city now, I used to live in the city. I used to live up on Tremblay Avenue. I came to the meeting tonight just to hear what was going to happen. I didn't know what was on the agenda, but I'm glad I came because I'm going to speak to it in a different kind of way. One of the projects, or several of the projects that I'm involved with right now within the county are having to do with the environment and climate and how we're going to address the future of our county, of our area. And I was driving through, I came down South Peru Street and was turning onto Bridge Street. And I'm looking at the backs of the buildings, and I'm looking at the trees that are practically falling down over here behind the, what used to be Philions. And I'm looking at the backs of the buildings that look dilapidated. And I'm looking at the trash in the street. I'm looking at the barriers that are in the spot right next to Durkee Street parking lot where there used to be that old gas station. And I'm looking at the different ways in Plattsburgh where we haven't really done a good job with what we have. And what's the reason for that? You know, I think there could have been a park there where that gas station used to be, where there could be benches there for people to enjoy. There could be a gazebo there. We could spend some money on, and maybe through taxing the owners of the buildings, I'm not quite sure how that would be done, but making kind of a cohesive look when you're driving down the city streets to come into this area of the city. I was really amazed by your comments about what the downtown will look like during this construction project. You won't even be able to drive down through here. And I agree with you that how would you go about parking? Sometimes I come into town and I have a hard enough finding a place to park as it is. I considered moving down here. I'm a retired person, I'm on a fixed income, and where I live now, I have a 2-bedroom and I pay far less than $1,200 a month, and I would not move into a 1-bedroom apartment downtown for $1,200 with no storage space, or I just wouldn't do that. I also wanted to say that when I went to the first few meetings where we did visioning at the college, and there were people who had a lot of great ideas about what they wanted to see. And I read the paper pretty regularly, and each time I would pick up the paper, I couldn't really figure out what was going to happen. I mean, you read the articles, you try to figure it out, you see what, you know, the conversation is about what's going to happen, but you'd have to save all of the articles in the paper and kind of put them into kind of some consequential order in order to figure out what is going to happen with this space. And I think a lot of people checked out trying to figure it out. And personally, it would be nice to have some of the renditions that I see here. I mean, that top one is gorgeous. We could do something like that now without spending all of this money. I know that if we're going to increase taxes, that would have to happen anyway in order to maybe do that. But I can't imagine a 5-story building on that corner. When I looked at that rendition, I'm thinking, well, that's not too bad. You know, I can see now more what it's going to look like, but that looks totally different than this. So the other thing that I want to say is that when you turn and go straight down Green Street, it looks like you're driving down an alley. And that's where the farmers market is going to be, down next to the water sewage treatment plant. That's not enticing to me. So I just wanted to bring a couple of those issues up just for you to think about, because I think there are a lot of things that we can do in the city of Plattsburgh to make it more livable, to make it more desirable, to attract people to downtown if we improve the buildings themselves that we have, and just to consider some of that without spending all of this money. Thanks.
Any other members not had enough to come forward? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Barbell. Roll call.
Council Barbell?
Yes.
Council Kelly?
Yes.
Council Gibbs?
Yes.
Council DeDominicis?
Yes.
Council McFarland?
Yes.
Council Moore?
Yes.
Thank you, folks, and be careful. Try and maintain social distance if you can.
Councilors? Wait 1 second while I get you corrected on the number. The number was wrong. Okay?
Well, you need
Are
to
you
sign a
talking to
bunch of
me?
stuff probably
She
too,
did.
yeah.
She did.
Did I already sign
Yeah,
that?
but you need to wait for the press to come along. Finish the copy of the